Hey there, and welcome to Journey to the Sunnyside. I'm your host, Mike Hardenbrook, and today's episode is for anyone who feels stuck or disconnected from their purpose. Whether you're over 50 or even in your 40s and starting to question where you're headed, my guest today, Julie Ciardi, is a former Fortune 50 executive who now helps people in midlife redefine their lives, create new identities, and align with what truly fulfills them. Today, she shares her journey for what could have been a midlife crisis to what she now calls a midlife creation. So, if you're feeling ready for a new direction but don't know where to start, this episode's going to give you insights and practical steps on where to begin. Okay, today I'm joined with Julie Ciardi. Julie, thanks for coming on today.
I'm so excited to be here, Mike.
Yeah, this is going to be a great conversation, and you have a unique take on things specifically for women of a certain age bracket. And so we're going to get into all that. But I wanted you to take us back a little bit. You have had this huge transformation. And in fact, you went on to write a book and help others with this and a program around it. But before all of that, you had this successful career that you realized it really wasn't fulfilling you. But before we get into all that, take us back what that life looked like before this big change happened.
Yeah, I love to because it was myself hearing stories like this that helped me get the courage to make the change. But about 6 years ago, I was still a vice president of marketing at IBM, where I had about a 20-year total corporate career, kind of your typical standard career of, going to school, trying to land the good job, got the master's degree, and started to work for someone else. I worked for a couple companies and then I worked for IBM for the longest part of that. I think about 16, 17 years I was with IBM. And I was in what I call the income lifestyle trap, which is like, we were making great money. My husband at the time, well, he's still the same husband. He has a different job now, but at the time, he was a police officer. I was the primary breadwinner. We had 3 children and I made a really good living doing what I did. I was a vice president of marketing and sales at IBM. And we were living the life, we had a beautiful big home, we had great vacations. I was so blessed with the 3 kids. And I'm going to be honest, I wasn't happy. I was happy with them. I was happy with, certain aspects of my life. But I'm the kind of person I gotta love what I'm doing and how I'm spending my time and making the money. And I did not love what I was doing, and it was a long time coming where I didn't love what I was doing. But I had so much fear, so much uncertainty, narratives that held me back, and so I stayed stuck there. And it began to affect my health. It affected my happiness. It affected my relationships. Because I think when you're not, loving what you do or you're miserable in some capacity, it's gonna come out, with your family or important relationships. So yeah, it's totally different from where I am at now. But it was hard to leave that because, again, you think when you're working for someone else, you feel more secure, more certain. And, we were just living really in the means of the salary and the bonuses and the things that were coming from my career. And so for me to leave that was going to impact not just me, but a whole family of 5. And so it was a challenging time to say the least.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that the case that all appearances from the outside, everything looks fantastic. And yet here you are struggling. And, my brother was a corporate attorney. I have a lot of friends who are corporate attorneys. So I hear that lock in, to make partner, all of a sudden your kids are in maybe private school. There's a standard of living. And now it's basically, I'm stuck here until the end of my career. Otherwise, I'm going to let everybody else down. I'd love to dig into what was it about that life that you started to question specific things that you were like, I actually need to make a change here because I don't want to keep going. Can you give us a little bit more detail on that?
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll hit on some of this throughout, but I really believe that our soul knows, like our spirit, our soul, like it's meant to do certain things, right? And we get lit up when we're doing things that we love. And when we're not, we feel the ramifications of that. So here's the funny thing. I knew I was in the wrong place, the wrong career the whole time. So it wasn't like it just happened one day, you know, it was the whole time to the point where my oldest child, she's 21, and I was pregnant with her. So it's 21 years ago. I'm pregnant with her, totally different time. Okay. We did not have social media. We did not even have online businesses. Like online, this is how far we've come in 2 decades, right? We did not have online businesses when I was pregnant with her. And I was like already figuring out what could I do next. I didn't want to have to go back to IBM and I wanted to do something different. And I remember I was on the phone with the vice president of franchising for a flower shop that I had encountered in Boston. And I'm like, maybe I can open one of these in New York. And I was on the phone, pregnant 21 years ago. And so it started early on. And from that point until 6 years ago, I tried lots of different things, but not far enough. I can remember this. You'll appreciate this story. Your listeners, I think, will find this funny too. I was so interested in becoming an entrepreneur that I actually went to entrepreneur.com. And back then, it was just still a magazine, I think. And it was back when websites were pretty much just static information, right? And I was like, I want to learn more. And so I could put my information in and order a binder. And so what came in the mail to find out how do I become an entrepreneur was like a 6-inch binder.
I remember ordering all those magazines, by the way.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I've been 15 years online, so I have
You
a
know.
glimpse of all of this. Yeah.
You know. And so it's every step of the way, every piece of the journey of learning. It, fear stopped me. I felt selfish, to be honest. Here I had this great life I created for my family. And it was very scary. And so the desire was there. And it kept being a someday. Someday I'll do this. Someday it will happen. Maybe when the kids have graduated from college, someday. And you know what? It's ironic because we're on a podcast changed the game. Somehow I started listening to podcasts. I would go on for a walk like every day when I worked at IBM. I was like, I just need to get out of the house, away from my desk. I worked in a global role, but it was virtual. We were virtual before virtual was a thing. So I was on conference calls all the time, kind of chained to my computer at home. And I would go on walks at least once a day and I would listen to podcasts. And all of a sudden, it was hearing other women, especially women who created businesses, left a corporate career they didn't love. And I mean, we're talking so many different kinds of businesses. Some were product based, some were online. That's when I first started hearing about the online space. This was a solid like 8, 9 years ago. And I'm like, what is this world that exists? Like, I had no idea that this online world existed from a business standpoint. And so you're in a bubble. I think, I was in a bubble in corporate. And so I started listening to these podcasts. And here's what changed. And this is what I help my clients with. What was possible changed, because all of a sudden I said, well, if this person is doing it or that person's doing it, why can't I do it? I'm smart. I got successful. Like, why can't I do this? And so my whole perspective of what was possible dramatically changed. And that's what then created like that opening, if you will, for to learn more, to figure out what could I do with the skill set I had and do what these other women were doing. So podcasts really changed the game for me. That's why I love it.
No, I love that. And so it sounds like you got to this point that you're ready to make a change. You haven't quite made it yet. But I think in anything that we're doing, we become so accustomed to everything. Fear gets in a way, we have attachment. What was the hardest part of letting go in your mind before you even actually did it, to this corporate identity, to this family that you've built up? What was it that was there a point that you were just like, I have to let that go to be able to move forward?
100%. And so to answer that in two ways, the thing that held me back, it actually was not the fear of failure. I honestly, like, I've always been a go getter. I've always been I believe in myself. I really have always believed in myself. Um, I didn't want to let my family down. So it was this selfishness. It was this fear that, yeah, I knew it wasn't going to happen overnight. I knew I could be successful, but I had this fear of letting my family down. This was the interesting one for me. It was like, what if I couldn't pay for college? What if I couldn't pay for the college for my kids? Like, I really wanted to make sure I could pay for college for my kids. And so it was like, it was just not being able to provide is really, and that fear of that is what held me back. And then the thing that shifted everything was a book. And it was a book by a woman named Bronnie Ware. And the book is called The Top Five Regrets of the Dying. I don't know if you heard of it. It's like, it's a doozy, powerful. And all when I read it, it was like there was the time before I read that book and the time after I read that book.
Oh, I love those pieces that you find here and there, or moments where it's just defining.
So like I have the chills saying it. I remember where I was. I'm a big fan of like I buy the actual book and I do the audio book. Just because with three kids and all the things, like it was a lot. And my 10-year-old, he's 10 and a half now, my youngest, he was a baby. And I had earbuds in and I was like rubbing his back in his room, trying to get him to fall asleep. As I know so many of you parents know of like, you can't leave the room until they fall asleep. And I just put the earbuds in and I was listening to this book. And it was talking about the top five regrets of the dying. And the big one was regretting not doing the thing that you really wanted to do because you were worried about other people. I mean, it basically was the exact thing that was holding me back. And I started to think about being like, God willing, 90, 95 years old, sitting in a rocking chair. I visualize this. I use this exercise with my clients all the time now, like sitting in a rocking chair and looking back and saying, would I regret anything? Would there be something I would regret because of fear or not wanting to let someone down or all the things? And hands down, it was like screamed at me in the face, like, you would totally regret not leaving IBM and at least trying to do your own thing or leaving working for someone else. It didn't have to be IBM, but like leaving working for someone else, doing this thing that's been on your heart for like 2 decades, like make it happen. The worst thing that can happen is I go back to work for someone else. Okay. And so that was that pivotal moment. I just needed to hear the right thing to have that perspective shift and to get to courage, which I know we'll probably hit a little bit on some mentors and people that have influenced me. But Dr. David Hawkins always like he's no longer with us, but his book, The Map of Consciousness, he talks about all it takes for like your life to flip, courage. So all that happened in that one singular moment was I got courage because I did not want to have that regret. And it was that simple. It took 20 years to get there, but it was that simple to get to that point and everything changed from that day.
Yeah, it's always simple in retrospect, right? And in the business world, I used to teach a lot of selling, and part of that is fear and just getting out there, and it is about like, what's the worst that can happen if you ask, if you go for it, and same with entrepreneurship or any big life change. And most of the time, it's just you're gonna be if you're unhappy now, you're just gonna be right back where you are. So you might as well just go for it. There's no loss there.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And when you think about what's the first thing and it's where you are, you
Yeah.
got to take the chance. Which I think, to be fair, though, I really do think everyone needs to have their moment. And so that's why I love podcasts, books, getting yourself into places where you can hear, see, be in the energy of the people that do have what you want, because you will eventually hear something, that thing that gives you that moment where you're like, enough. Like, I'm going to give this a chance. You're going to hear the right person share their story. And it's going to, those moments, I have definitely several of them that are so defining all along this journey. And it's just because I happened to hear the right thing I needed to hear, but I was also in pursuit. So you got to be in pursuit. You got to be putting yourself into those situations where you're going to then encounter the exact thing you need to hear or see or read.
Yeah, I love that part of it, and keeping yourself open to that as well. And we talked about courage, and that's addressed by a lot of people. But I think also this sense of self that you felt maybe that you were selfish. That's something that I think is less often talked about. But in order to first of all, if you're unhappy, you're not showing up in life 100% for all the people that you love and can make an impact. And maybe you're not even reaching the people that you should be impacting because of this feeling of selfishness. So I love that you were able to get past that and also see that like there's much bigger concept. This is maybe it might feel a little selfish, but I'm doing this in a selfless way.
Completely. I think of the women that have come into my world that I've been able to help, hundreds and hundreds of women over the last 6 years. And like they they've said to me, like, thank you for taking a chance, because if not, then I wouldn't have met you and learned this. Or, so we do all have this ripple effect on other humans when we take that step. And here I was so worried about my kids. And the ironic thing is that it was the best thing to ever happen to them, because now I have a 21 and 19-year-old that are in college. They're both in college. The little guy is in fifth grade, and like what's possible for them, wide open. Like in terms of entrepreneurship or working for someone, or just their ideas are probably very, very different than they would have been had I stayed in a job that I didn't love, them full well knowing I didn't love it. So it's like to be able to see someone go after their goals and their dreams, and even their friends. It's really cute when they're like, I love listening to your mom or watching what she's doing. And it just gives that ripple effect, that one step, that one moment where you're like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take a chance. You don't even realize how the impact you can have across so many different people.
It blows your mind. There's actually this book, Power of Intention. I'm a huge Wayne Dyer fan, and it talks about the impact that you can have on people. And if you operate at a high vibration, his estimates are around 92,000 people can be affected in your lifetime. And it goes up in the tier of that. And when you read that, it's just so impactful. And if you believe it, which I do,
Yeah.
it's incredible what we can actually do and achieve.
Yes. That's similar to Dr. David Hawkins. He created a scale of frequency. So
Yeah.
like in terms of, the effect that you can have on the world, and I bet you Wayne Dyer loved him. I bet you
Yeah,
he probably,
he cites them all the
oh,
time,
there
so
you go. There you
I'm
go.
sure that yeah,
Yeah.
and that's
That's
I read both of them. Something about Wayne's style of writing connects to me in that book, but
that's
yes,
the thing.
same
It's like,
ideas.
to that point, it's just something else I'd recommend to listeners is like, find that person that resonates. I'm a, you know, teacher and mentor uses human design. And so this is real. Like people, the frequency of people's voices and what they say resonate with us differently. I mean, we connect with different people. You could have two people saying the exact same thing. Like let's take Wayne Dyer and like Bob Proctor, right? They're totally different humans with different voices, very similar message that was just shared differently. So we resonate with different people. Find the people that you really resonate with and learn. Just be a student. Like really decide you're going to go deep in their content, repetition and study, and you'd be surprised the shifts and changes that begin to happen in you.
Yeah, I love that aspect is really should just find the person that can deliver it in a way that makes the impact and just connects with you, and you want more of it, or you wanna take action on it. So the inside of me wants to fast forward straight to kind of like today. But before we do, I think that like this moment of transformation that you were going through, it's important to talk about the different aspects of it. And we've covered some of those, but one of it is the stage in life that you were and are. And this is like midlife. So, I guess you could call it the midlife crisis. And you have this concept of midlife creation. So maybe touch on those points, like how it unfolded in your own life and how you see it broadly speaking.
Yeah. It's amazing. Again, just like the Steve Jobs quote, you can't connect the dots looking forward, only backward. If I look backward, it all is clear. But at the time, it wasn't as clear. I think that part of the problem is that, and things are changing, we're getting a bit of a different narrative, which is nice. But the narrative I grew up with, which it was, you had to figure out what you were going to do with your life by like 19, 18, 19, going into college. I mean, you had to like, what was your major? What were you going to go into? And then, picking that career. And I mean, we don't know anything really about ourselves. There's so much more growing to be done. And, you know, to me, I think we're in a time where, you change careers in your 40s or like even 50, like you must be crazy. You must be insane, right? You're like, no one does that. And I think we got to change that narrative because, quite frankly, I don't think we really know. I think that we continue to grow and develop, and we're supposed to go through, years, even decades of learning of wisdom that culminate. Like it's wisdom from a skill set and also wisdom of experience, and also just like understanding who you are. And it starts to culminate, and it's that's why I am a huge fan of human design because the whole idea is that actually at 50 it's when you can become this most incredibly useful, like wildly impactful person because of all of the experience and wisdom that you've had. And it might look a little different in the second half. We think people go crazy. Oh my God, they must be having a midlife crisis if people start wanting to do something different. I know what I was 40 when all this transpired. And I was like, all right, we got to sell our house, which is what we did. We sold our house. Look, we need to sell our house. We need to downsize. I'm going to leave IBM. We're going to do all these things. People literally thought I was insane. Like, what is wrong with you? And then fast forward like 5 years later, they're like, you were a genius. I'm like,
Yes.
more people need to do this, right? It's like we've never been taught that this is okay. And so, I think that midlife and so many people go through this and we're meant to. I honestly think we're meant to. I think that when we're not in alignment, it's kind of like the universe, God, whatever you believe, kind of shakes you around the shoulders and is like, yeah, you're not quite where you need to be to fulfill your life's work. And that's what happened to me, like 40. I mean, it was like, that's when I read that book. That's when I knew, like, no, like this has to change. And that's why I love helping women in that time frame of their life. And just to give you some cool examples, like I have a woman that's in part of our program who she's like a NASA scientist. Okay. She's like this tech scientist, NASA, like she's so smart. She's kind of in her second half of life. She's not planning to leave NASA. She loves it, but over the years, had developed this wisdom and this purpose of how to help women in tech, like young women in tech and women in tech grow up and become leaders in tech. And so she's got a framework and a methodology, and she wrote a book. And now she is like kind of launching a speaking career while she also has the day job that she has with NASA. People would think that was crazy in the past, right? This is the new era I think we're going into where like this is what we're meant to do. We're meant to like bring the wisdom and bring this knowledge and bring it out into the world to have that big impact. And I think that's why I like to say midlife creation. It's like, okay, what's next? What are we creating now? And we've asked ourselves that question when we're in high school and then in college and then in our 20s. And we're like, what's next? Where am I going to live? What's the job? And all these things. And then all of a sudden we start asking those questions so that when the midlife crisis hits, like we're just not used to asking ourselves, well, what's next? What do I want? What do I want to create? But the more people that can realize it's actually a super normal, important part of the human experience, like imagine what we could all be doing with the second half of our life instead of, I remember 55 was you plan for retirement. Like, or you're like, I'm 50. I just turned 50 this year. Like, I really feel like I'm just getting started. It's why, it's why my book is called 50 Not Finished. It's like, we're here to like just begin at this age. I believe it like in my core and just helping to change that narrative because it's a deep narrative that needs changing.
There was so much there that you said that I like personally identified with. First of all, let me just say that I still joke around and look at my wife and say, one day I'm going to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
Good.
And that's true. And yeah, who said that you have to plateau or flatten out at a certain age?
Yeah.
And it is true. You hear these sayings like 40 is the new 30, 50 is the new or whatever. It could even go further back. But even then, like who says that designation means anything anyways? And I identify, I'll share a little bit, is that basically, I came through marketing technologies and software as an executive, usually my own companies as well, but I was always in the business world. And I had this personal challenge around alcohol, which then I started writing this journal that then turned into a book that then I decided I would publish. And then fast forward, here I am on the microphone with Sunnyside. Um, but I completely made this 180. I said, I'm not doing that anymore. It doesn't bring me the fulfillment that I'm looking for in life. And this is actually making an impact and it feels good. And even if it's uncertain, I'm going to go for it. I was fortunate enough to come from the startup world where high risk is kind of the name of the game. So I felt I had a lot of preparation for making that transition. That was a stark difference. But yeah, I just want to say and share a little bit there that everything you say there, I'm 45, going to be 46, and doing something completely new the last 18 months.
And by the way, thank you because the reason we're even talking, right, is that I'm such a fan of Sunnyside. So it's like you taking that risk, taking that chance, and going on to that next thing. I mean, the impact, the ripple effect just being incredible. So thank you.
Thank you. That touches my heart. It really does. I don't just say that.
Okay, that wraps up part one of this conversation with Julie Ciardi. Thanks, Julie, for sharing these deeply personal insights on the journey to rediscovering your purpose. In the next episode, we'll pick up the conversation and go even deeper and where her story ended up. If today's episode resonated with you, head on over to sunnyside.co and take our quick quiz to explore how mindful choices can support your goals. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @JoinSunnyside. And if you loved this conversation, hit subscribe and stay connected. And until next time, cheers to your mindful drinking journey.